week's podcast is sponsored by Brighter Vision. What's the point of having a beautiful website if it doesn't attract the clients you want to see? As the worldwide leaders of website design for therapists, Brighter Vision sees this issue happen way too often. A nice looking website doesn't equate to a successful website. The truth is, your current website might even be turning off potential clients. That's where Brighter Vision comes in. Brighter Vision's team of website designers will create a website that is centered around attracting and retaining your ideal client so that you can have a nice looking website as well as a successful one. Better yet, Brighter Vision is offering $100 off exclusively for listeners of the One Inside podcast. To take advantage of this offer, simply go to brightervision.com/inside. Again, that's brightervision.com/inside. You can find that link in the show notes. Welcome to the One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sollenberger. I'm excited that you and all of your parts have taken time to be with me and all of my parts. If you are a coach, a client, a therapist, if you are in business or education, and you're curious about the IFS model, you are in the right place. Now, let's see what happens on today's podcast. Hey everyone, welcome. Today's podcast is with Heidi Andersen. Heidi and I chat like two girlfriends, even though we've never met. We just hit it off and we talk about things that are obviously really near and dear to her heart, but are near and dear to my heart too, which is about body image and eating disorders. The thing that's interesting is this is being published the week before Thanksgiving, and probably 3 of the next 6 or so podcasts are going to be around this topic. They'll all be a little bit different, and they'll be scattered from now. It's the end of November, from now until probably January or even February. This is a good topic for this time of year because I'm not sure about you all, but I tend to either be connected to the parts of me that are obsessed about my body at this time of year. I'm not sure if that's about being around family that I'm not around, or if it's about eating different because of the parties and the holiday season, which starts. So there's a part of me that says, oh, it's Halloween, I'm gonna eat all the Halloween candy. And that just continues from now until New Year's. And so there's this part of me that struggles with this issue around this time of year, maybe more than other times of year. So I just thought it was kind of interesting, the timing of it. So Heidi and I chat. I think this is really fun. We start off because I record these over Zoom, and with Zoom, you can start recording them immediately. And so I was waiting for Heidi, and I was eating, and because I'm always running from one thing to the next. And so I was eating, and I had stopped the record button. Her and I started talking, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not recording. And so you sort of just jump into that conversation. Anyways, we talk about eating disorders and body image. We talked obviously lots about parts and the parts involved in those things. We both share lots of personal stories, and I get super triggered at a part. And yeah, so that's going to be fun to listen to that. Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoy this one. I'm having so much fun doing this, and I really appreciate your feedback and nice comments. I hope everyone has a really great Thanksgiving. Enjoy this one. I have this part of me that worries that we're going to do the whole thing, and it's either not going to be recording, or it's not going to record on my computer, or someone's going to steal my laptop. But that part it's not motivated enough to find other ways to make sure that it's saved, like an external hard drive or something.
Yeah, it doesn't, it's a part that's collapsed. It doesn't actually take action around its fears, huh?
I like that. I don't think I've ever heard that before.
Yeah.
It's a part that's collapsed. Tell me what that means.
I think of it as if that part is in fight, flight, freeze mode. It sounds like it's kind of in like a high freeze around. I don't know what this is, a scary thing that could happen, but it's not in a settled place that it can then actually take action on how it's trying to protect you.
I'm going to use that language. That's good.
Yeah, it's kind of like an overlap of nervous system.
I like that. So tell me, we just started jumping in. Tell me where you are in the world and what you see if you look out a window.
So I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and it is a very beautiful time of year here. When I look out the window, I can see my very favorite tree in my house, which is a box elder, and it has about 10% of its leaves left. And the colors came late this year because we had a super, super warm fall like most people. So there's still a little bit more splash of color than usual at this time of year. It's just, the sky is really blue, kind of Carolina blue with the wispy clouds. I can't actually wait to get out in the weekend.
What will you do this weekend if you got outside or
Well,
when you get outside?
I have my child, so I have him every other weekend. So on the weekends that I have him and we're home, we usually go on hikes and adventures. And I have a dog, a Bernese Mountain Dog, so she likes to come along with us. So that kind of stuff. There's lots of it to do here.
How old is your child?
10.
Mine is 8 and he's actually home. So even though you and I went back and forth about figuring out the day and the time, and this was like a perfect time for a school day, oh, he actually doesn't have school today. I was
Yeah,
like, whatever, I can't even. So I'm
it's a
sure
lot
he'll
to
run.
juggle.
What?
It's a lot to juggle.
Isn't it? I feel like I need an assistant.
Oh, definitely. Where are
So
you? I see an Outer Banks. I see an Outer Banks sticker on your fridge.
yeah, so I'm in New Hampshire actually. So I'm in New Hampshire and I need you to know that I have my winter hat on because it's 30 degrees and it was snowing earlier. So my son and I, we actually went for a hike with some friends right before our call and it was so cold. Like
That's impressive.
it was that my hands, I had gloves on. We had so many layers on and it was like the wind was picking up and I'm still cold.
Yeah.
But the sun is out, and the sun, as long as the sun is out, I feel like I'm fine. I'm originally from Maryland, and you probably know this that I don't know why you would know this, but people in Maryland tend to vacation in the Outer Banks, and so
Yeah.
we've been vacationing in the Outer Banks for since I was probably like in middle school, and so my
Oh,
parents still go down there, and then my mom, one of her best friends, has a house right on the beach. Like literally, my favorite thing about the house is I can sit in the bathroom on the toilet and see the ocean. So I'm like, it's the best. Like, when else can you like sit on the toilet? And I'm like, I'll just never leave this little bathroom. It's my favorite thing. It's great. Yeah. So we try to go every year. My mom goes every year for a couple of weeks. So it's great.
nice.
Where do you vacation since you live down there? Where do you end up going?
Yeah, so I grew up in Chapel Hill, and when I lived in Chapel Hill, we did kind of tend towards the Outer Banks area. But now that I live in Asheville and the rest of my family is in Charlotte, we kind of go to the southern beaches in North Carolina. So we every summer go to Holden Beach, which is almost the most southern beach in North Carolina.
Wow. So we would go to Nag's Head. That's where my mom always goes. She goes
Yeah,
to Nag's Head, and my husband's parents usually go a little more south, like more like Hatteras, kind of like by the lighthouse a little bit.
yeah. I love the Outer Banks.
I know. Every time I go, I'm like, I want to live here. But I know if you lived there, it wouldn't be. There's no trees. I don't know. I don't know if I want to live there, but
It's 8.5 hours from where I live in North Carolina. It's crazy, isn't
I'm speechless. It's like 12 hours from me.
it?
That's
Long
crazy.
state. Yeah, North Carolina is a long state.
Wow. So is Asheville in the mountains?
Yeah, the western part.
Okay. Okay. That's so funny. I never think about that. And I'm from Maryland, which is a tiny little state, and I live in New Hampshire, which is it's long, but yeah, it's funny. I would have never thought that. I'm like, yeah, you could probably go to the Outer Banks all the time.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about you? So I guess I want people to know that we met. This is the first time we've actually met, but I think it's a fun story. So I have a friend named Amy who lives in North Carolina, and she just happened, she's not an IFS, she's a therapist, but she's not an IFS therapist. And she was telling me that she's reading this book called Reclaiming Beauty, and she was telling me that I should get it. And then it was like an afterthought. She's like, oh, she's an IFS therapist. And I was like, what? So then I ended up bugging you and being like, I want to get to know you. And you agreed to do the podcast. So I think that's pretty cool how
Yeah,
we,
I love that. Just
I
kind of
know.
following the connections.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I guess I want to hear about your IFS journey, and we'll definitely talk about reclaiming beauty. But I guess let's start with how you came to IFS and when all that happened.
I have taken the level 1 IFS training 2 times. I took it the first time, and about a little over halfway through, I actually dropped out because I realized if I kept going, I was going to get divorced. If I got closer in touch with myself. And then I got divorced, and then I said, okay, it's safe to go back to IFS now. Yeah.
Wow.
So I think maybe I was right out of graduate school, and one of the women at my internship, IFS was her main model that she used. And so I was really curious about it. I love the non-pathologizing aspect of the model, and the idea that our parts are just trying to figure out ways to help us, even though that shows up in ways that can be not that helpful for our lives. Their intention is to be helpful. So I felt like that perspective on the things that we struggle with was so beautiful. And then this idea about connecting with ourself, it's a really big part of the work that I do in reclaiming beauty. So just there was a really nice overlap of this way of looking at humans and the work that I was creating. So IFS has just kind of become a part of, it's like in my philosophy around how I see people, and so it's part of how then I do my work as a therapist.
I love that. And I think people will say that before. Like they'll be like, I already thought that. Like I already kind of had that idea of how people were made or like how our minds worked. And IFS actually just gave me that framework, or basically it put out there what I was already experiencing or what I had already thought. How did you start putting Reclaiming Beauty together? Like was that a parallel time, or tell me about that?
Yeah, so reclaiming beauty, I ended up working mostly with clients with eating disorders, and it sort of became an accidental passion of mine. Some people have their path with working with people with eating disorders is really from their own personal journey, and mine came more from really relating to all the underlying vulnerabilities that makes a person choose eating disorders, although not necessarily having that experience, but just really having a lot of compassion and empathy around what's happening for people with those struggles. And as I started to kind of do this work in that field, I just got really excited about the ways, because I think so with a lot of mental health issues and eating disorders in particular, I think the biggest piece is that there's the self, as IFS would call it, and what I call it in my work, kind of our original beauty. We just end up having so much judgment about who we are and what we have to offer to the world. And as a result of that judgment and the shame around our gifts, we get stuck in these patterns that then, rob us of our ability to share that. Kind of the idea in reclaiming beauty is that we can start to kind of get a sense of what happened in our life that created a disconnection from our ability to see our beauty. So in the IFS model, that would be, what happened in our life that created disconnection from ourself, that made us had to create these parts to protect ourselves.
Hmm.
Yeah, so there was an overlap. And so when I was writing the book, I would reference the IFS model a lot because it's a great way to explore what's happened to kind of create that disconnection.
Hmm. Well, and in as you describe it, it sounds very what's that word? I
Yeah,
can't say it.
pathologizing.
Yeah, I'm like non blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because and I think about like people with eating disorders, how that is not how they're often thought about or talked to or
Yes.
handled or whatever. That's not been probably their experience. People don't
Right.
treat them that way.
Exactly. It's a very misunderstood and stigmatized issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for that reason, a person who struggles with these issues, but then also struggles with the shame of a world that really misunderstands what's happening for them.
Um, like how did you go from like these are my ideas to then like I'm gonna write a book and call it Reclaiming Beauty, and how did that all happen?
Yeah, it's fun to talk about. Thank you. Actually, today is the 4-year birthday of when Reclaiming Beauty came out into the world.
Oh my goodness. Happy birthday to you and your
My second
baby.
child, yes.
Yeah, yeah, you produced it, right? So you're like, is something else you've produced. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. So, I was working at a residential treatment center for women with eating disorders, and just very in it around trying to have an understanding about what was happening for my clients, and then also having this parallel process of kind of a marriage deteriorating that was causing me to sort of come up against some of my own protective parts and firefighters, and a big time with my exiles, kind of
Mm,
working with that process. And so those two things kind of happening at the same time helped me sort of form this idea around the reclaiming beauty process. And it's the core of it is just this idea that we are kind of born into the world. We have original beauty, which is our strengths and gifts that are to offer the world. And then life experiences disconnect us from this. And so we're really not able to see what we have to offer is something of value. And we go into shame, and then that shame keeps us stuck, and we may act in behaviors that are the firefighters to manage the shame kind of thing. So just sort of seeing this in my clients, really wanting to give that perspective, to share that perspective. And the other piece of Reclaiming Beauty is there is a deck of cards that go with it. So the idea is when we're disconnected from our beauty, we have not had enough experiences where our authentic beauty has been mirrored to us. So the images in the card deck is a way to kind of look at different reflections of different parts of a person's authentic beauty and kind of explore, like, can I see that in myself?
mm,
And the other aspect of the images is that, in our brain, when we have self-criticism and shame, which of course self-criticism is another protective part, which I think is a really interesting thing to break down with people. When we have that pathway, we need an invitation to start a new pathway of self-compassion and self-acceptance around ourselves. So I think of the cards and the images as like a trailhead marker that says, hey, I know you want to go down this pathway of self-criticism and shame, but what about this pathway of seeing yourself through a different lens, connecting with yourself with the compassion that the IFS process asks us to connect to with our parts. So the images were kind of the cards and the images were kind of coming to me in different patterns. And this is a cool story, actually. At one afternoon, I was playing trains with my son. So my son he was 3 years old at the time. And so we were kind of in the flow, right? My mind was in the flow. We were playing trains, we're having fun. And then all of a sudden, it felt like a download of the first 40 of the 50 Reclaiming Beauty cards. So I sat down and I just kind of wrote it all out. Yeah, it was so exciting. It was like, wow, this is fun. And I think it was that being in that play and that flow, and I was in myself, right? All the other parts were quiet, so this really came through myself. So I wrote down all the different card ideas, and then I just started kind of putting them together in a little process around what would be the flow of the process of disconnection from our beauty, and how do we get back to connected to it. So disconnection from ourself, how do we get back to ourself? And so I just kind of laid that out. Eventually, as I was writing the book, I realized there was about 10 that I had blind spots on that kind of cracked me up. For example, forgiveness, responsibility. So that's why I had an editor. She was like, Heidi, I think you're missing some important pieces here. So that was helpful. Yeah. And then the book came from basically just I had the idea for the word, the suggested thought or affirmation, and then I would write just a little bit on it, not as an intention of me being an expert on it, but rather, here's some thoughts around this concept. what do you think about it and how does it apply to you? So that's how it all kind of unfolded. And it was really the creation process of it, as far as the flow, went really smoothly. Kind of bringing it into a tangible fruition was a whole nother process where I had to deal with a lot of my parts. But the creation process, I really felt in myself as I was kind of moving that through.
I want to know what part, like what, as you're talking about that, what part comes up is like, oh yeah, I had to deal with that one.
Oh, in the book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's such a great question. So I had mapped it out, right? I've mapped out the sections and the different cards that go with each section. Literally, it took me 2 years to write, because if I hadn't gotten to the card in my process, I just totally spun out. So it was an opportunity, and at the time I was working through, my divorce and how that impacted my sense of self. And yeah, so the one that took me 4 months to write 250 words about was self-approval.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
That's good.
yeah, yeah.
What can I ask why that was so hard to write about?
Yeah, well, so I was having this parallel process of feeling kind of not seen for the beauty of who I was as a person in my marriage.
Mm,
So there, the self-approval card is around, can we kind of give us ourselves some boundaries and space from what other people are reflecting, and really what helps us know and be and reflect our own self, and
mm,
the importance of that as a skill. And because I had felt that the lack of that in my marriage, I was really seeking that externally. And I had to kind of come back to, okay, Heidi, there is the part of you that wants to go do some firefighter behaviors around dating and that kind of thing to get this external validation met. And that's actually not meeting the deeper need, which is no matter what happens in my life, be can I be connected to and honoring and feel good about myself with a capital S, or in the Reclaiming Beauty language, my original beauty.
I think that it is fascinating that that same idea of like you went through level one and stopped because you knew I can't do this further. And if I'm going to stay married, I can't do this further.
Yeah.
And that you're working through this process of this book and these cards, and your parts kept saying, basically what I'm hearing is like in both of those instances, your parts were like, nope, you need to look at this. Like you need to look at us, and we're not going to let you go further unless you listen.
Yes, absolutely. It's exactly what happened. And it's a really good perspective of it. And I think that speaks to the wisdom of our protectors, right? Like, our protectors get a bad rap because, they do crazy things, or they're really rigid and intense. And the reality is they are trying to help us.
Yeah, so what ends up happening is I think about right, so what ends up happening is then I'm so mad at the part of me. For some reason I thought of like if you have a cold. Like sometimes I think if I have a cold, then I'm so mad that I have a cold because I can't function. And then so then my focus and my energy goes towards being mad that I have a cold instead of the part of me that might be like I'm letting this cold happen because you need to slow down and
Yeah.
because you need to rest and you're not listening to your body. So I'm going to full stop you. And so, but because I'm so aggravated, or there's another part that's so aggravated, then I don't even notice the motives, which you talk about. I don't notice the motives and then listen and see the parts. And then back to being then that part isn't seen.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah, and the importance of that curious relationship around the part rather than the judgment of the part, which really keeps us stuck and merged with it.
Yeah, right. Because then you're just so stuck in the part, and I'm just so aggravated, or you're just so aggravated with, the part that's stopping you, or you're so focused on the behavior, right? If I'm firefighter behavior, whether that's overeating or restricting or throwing up.
Or obsessing about your body because that's something you really control.
Yeah, that's so funny they said that because I am like, oh yeah, that's another firefighter behavior, isn't it?
Mhm.
Obsessing about body.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because it's it's the reality. The underneath part is I have shame about something about who I am, and instead of addressing the shame and bringing in self-compassion and understanding what needs to be healed, it's easier to focus on something that's tangible.
Hmm.
So the body becomes a place where we play all of this out. And actually, this is the intro premise of Reclaiming Beauty, is that if you are struggling with a relationship with your body where you're in a lot of war, can you start to bring in mindful curiosity of that part of you? And in that way, our relationship with our body can really become a spiritual practice, because instead of riding the challenges of it, we are just being curious around, okay, how am I vulnerable to playing out all the ways that I feel about myself on my body today? And it takes you right
Wow.
to the exile when you can be curious and mindful.
So I have to tell you that a part of me was like, just came up in my head that was like, no thanks, not interested. I don't want to do any of that.
Oh, I want to hear about that part of you. What are you noticing?
I don't know. It's so funny. It was really very loud.
Yeah.
What was that animal?
Oh, my cat. This is Sylvie. We have a cat and a dog in our family.
I want to see it.
Okay.
Sorry, the listeners, you don't get to see it. She just took this fuzzy thing, just went through the screen. Aw, hi. Aw, so cute.
Sylvie is so in herself, it's not even funny. So I'm curious, like, what you noticed as far as the resistance. That might be
Oh,
one word, but
no, that's okay. I thought what I noticed was that that was going to be too hard or too much or too like it's going to be flooding. Like that's too like that idea that there's a part of me that is focused on my body image, right? That can be obsessed with how I look and have lots of opinions about it. Um, but that's not really where I focus. I focus on the part of me that like eats too much or doesn't eat enough or exercises too much or doesn't exercise. It's sort of the behaviors. And so then it was like, oh, that I would even start to focus on the part of me that is thinking about my body and then having shame to my body. And yay, we get to the exile. I'm like, no, yay, no, no, yay. I'm not down for that. That's what I was heard. Like, no, yay, I'm not down for that.
yeah, yeah. There's a card in the Reclaiming Beauty deck that's called I Am, and it is a star with like pinks, and the idea of that card is about I am a subject rather than an object. So I wonder if this is part of what's scary about the exile, because I think the pain of why many of us obsess about our appearance is related to the fact that we have had experiences where we're valued for the object part of us, meaning our appearance or some way that somebody wants us to be, or we're treated like an object by trauma history or boundary violations. And that teaches us then to be in a self objectifying relationship with ourself.
Hmm.
And so the exile around body image is often the place where we hold some of our deepest wounds, because it's like body image issues, preoccupation with the body is sort of playing out this self-objectifying relationship. So it's a protector, because it's like I don't have to look at the pain of how I've been treated or what I've been through in my life that has created this. Yeah. Is that making sense to you?
Yes, it is making complete sense. And actually, as you're saying that, I was thinking you said something earlier that reminded me of Janine Roth. And she talks about how and I'm not going to say this right, you said it really well about how whatever is happening with us gets played out in our bodies.
Yes.
And,
Yep.
or like what we think about ourselves, or what we think spiritually and relationally, all that stuff, always it gets played out in our bodies.
Yes.
So I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about that, because you've said so many good things, and I just had this internal reaction that we can just ignore.
Yeah.
I'll talk to it later.
But I imagine if it's coming up for you, it's coming up for other people that are listening to our conversation.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And the thing that's interesting though is being a therapist, it's like, oh, when I have that experience, it reminds me of how uncomfortable that is for my client when I'm like, let's go right to the exile. Yay, I'm so excited. And they're like, no thanks. So sometimes it's like good to have those experiences because I'm like, oh yeah, now I can have a little more empathy for that.
Yeah, and I always talk to my clients about the importance of honoring our protectors. Like they're there for a reason. They have, they have an intention to keep us safe, and we have to honor them. And like eating disorder behaviors is a great example of that, because many people will sit with clients with the eating disorders and be like, we've got to reduce the symptoms, right? Pressure, pressure, pressure on that. And I think that loses the ability to attune to the fact that this person is using those symptoms as a protector, and that has to be kind of honored before we go to the exile part.
Yeah, definitely. Right, because we're like, we just need your weight to be up, or we need your weight to be not at this number, or
We need
yeah.
to stop doing this scary thing that we see you doing with food. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how much of that is I need you to stop doing that because I need you to stop doing that?
Exactly.
So can you talk a little bit about this idea about how we treat our bodies as how we like that spiritual connection, about how it's playing out, like what's happening in our bodies is playing out our stuff. I don't know. I don't know how Janine Ross says it too.
Yeah, she's amazing. I love all of her stuff. She's definitely an influence on me.
Have you ever done one of her like workshop things?
Yeah, I did. I went to like a day-long workshop in Atlanta about, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago. It was cool. Yeah.
I don't think she doesn't come around very often, but um,
I don't really know exactly what I would add to that thought, other than that perspective is a perspective that I agree with, and that definitely is part of what I'm working with my clients as well. That that the importance of just being curious around our patterns with how we're relating to our body, because it's Janine Roth talks about it as like how we eat is how we live. So our relationship with food is like this mirror for all of our relationships. So that would also be our relationship with our body as a mirror for all of our relationships as well.
hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's something that people don't, and I don't think about that, but I think that's something that is, I don't know. It's just like, wow, I almost want to sit and be like, let's pause and just sit on that because that feels really like a wow statement.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the philosophy of reclaiming beauty is that idea that we have this original beauty and we have these parts. And so you talk about in this, you sent me this awesome article and you talk about these all of me practices.
Yeah.
So can we talk about that? Because I think that sounds really fun. I mean,
Yeah.
not for me, but for everybody else.
The all of me for everyone else. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, there's in Reclaiming Beauty, there's actually the IFS card, I call it.
Oh, I think you sent that to me. I'm
Yes.
going to post that.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I loved that one.
the IFS card is all of me, and the idea that all parts, the whole IFS principle that all parts are welcome, and how do we welcome in all parts of ourselves to kind of give us information about what's happening internally. Yeah, I don't remember the specific all of me practices, except for I do remember one of them was go find an IFS therapist.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
The one that I actually thought this would be a really good idea is you identify part that you want to get to know, right? Which we do that. And then you said, a place to start would be a part that hates your body or holds negative beliefs on your body. And even reading that, the same thing that I thought, Oh, I often just believe the part that hates my body. Like, of course it hates my body. I hate my body. So, of course, let's go to the part that overeats. Like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? So it's like, oh, so when I read that, I was like, oh, if I sat with the part, and I think that's what you suggest is sitting with the part that hates your body. I don't think you say it this way, but you're sitting with it with self, right? So we have a
Yeah,
self to part relationship with the part that hates my body, and just bringing
exactly.
some curiosity and then asking it some questions.
Yeah, so exactly. Thank you for reminding me about my own idea.
No, well, you have a gazillion ideas, right? And so then you're like, which one?
Yeah. So that is really inviting that beginning process that happens when you're doing IFS work, which is the idea of befriending a part. So, with that, you would kind of identify the part of you that's having this complicated relationship with your body, hates your body, or doesn't want to be embodied. And first thing that you would do is just kind of identify where do you experience that part in or around your body. So, you know, for a lot of clients, that might be like a part that's really in their head because it's this judgment. But some people, because it's related to the shame, are just feeling it really deep in their core right from the beginning, like a nausea or a constriction in their belly. So because we're talking about shifting relationship with our body, that where does the part live in your body is really important because it starts to help the client get curious about tracking the sensations because that's how we can start to really befriend our body. Yeah, so that's a really important first step. So if someone was doing this process on their own, I would start there. Did you want to say something before I went
I
on?
did. I'm sorry. I was like, oh,
No,
I
no,
have a
no.
question.
That's a good statement.
I'm getting so excited talking to you. I feel like I need to like calm down.
Yeah, great. No, I love it.
um, okay, now I forgot it. Okay, here's my question. Do you, because this has happened to me, I think because of my own stuff,
Yeah.
that I often am not able to connect with where it is in my body because there is such a cutoff.
Yes.
And so I wondered if that's been either your experience personally or your experience when you meet with, all of these clients, especially ones with eating disorders, that they can't even tell you, that they don't have any idea where it is in their body.
Absolutely. And that's exactly, I mean, that's part of the constellation of challenges for someone who has an eating disorder, body image issues, is that coming into the body doesn't feel safe, right? There's not a sense of safety for whatever part of their history. So it's a very, just the question is kind of an invitation to shine a light on, wow, I actually have no sense of what's happening in my body. And that's really important information for the
Yeah.
healing process. Yeah.
I like that. And so then what do you do? I love that idea that it shines a light, like just the question itself shines a light. I love that. That's beautiful. So then what do you do? Do you try to just keep them like how do you handle that when they're like when you're like, where do you find it in your body? Like that's the first F, where do you find it in your body?
Yeah.
So what do you do as a clinician when that happens?
Yeah. So this is where some of the other influences on me kind of come into my work. I have also done the level 1 training for sensory motor psychotherapy, and I'm trained in a therapeutic process for that somatics and eating disorders called embodied recovery. So those two lenses or maps are also woven in for me around the IFS work that I do. And so in those models, we really are honoring that it's doesn't feel safe for a client to come into their body. So we just do it in very, very small ways. Right? And so that first small way might just be like, oh, I can see that a lot of what you're experiencing is really from your head, and it's scary to come into the body. And just kind of name that, and therefore we do it very slowly. So it might be, is there a sensation that you are feeling somewhere in your body that you're aware of, right? So just kind of starting with that tracking. So in the big therapy word for this is building a sense of interoceptive awareness. So I love that word. It's so fun. So interoceptive awareness is the ability to kind of be able to track these sensations in our body. interoception is one of our near senses. And that skill is actually been found to be a real bridge for people to start to shift from this I'm just a walking head to being embodied, because it's starting to see, oh, if I can start to track my sensations, I can also start to track my nervous system and what's happening for me, and find ways to add in what needs to happen so I can feel a sense of safety in my system and in my body. And in that way, the kind of arch is then we go from our body being this place where we are at war to a body being a place where we can actually use it as one of our greatest resources to create a sense of safety, because we're not able to really be in ourself with a capital S unless we're in that safe zone in our nervous system.
Yeah, I mean, I think that idea of being embodied, like, is one of the experiences of self.
Yes.
And so if there are parts that don't allow that for lots of different reasons, then that would be, I'm just thinking that would be almost like just giving someone who has so much body hatred, giving them the experience of just feeling embodied just a little bit, that would be so healing, just it's in and of itself.
Yeah. And you remind me that just like in all IFS, like you don't push into the exile, right? So if the body is an exile itself, right, then you're going to spend more time around the protective part that doesn't want to look at the body, right? So it's almost as if you've identified another protector when someone says it's scary to come into my body, and you would start to kind of be curious about the protective intent of that before you kind of go into the body, if the body is experienced as an exile itself.
Okay, tell me, first of all, okay, so I have two things. One, I think that we often forget that idea that if we slow down and focus on that protector, we're going to get so much more like bang for our buck.
Yes.
If we do that, even though we're like, I don't want to talk about that protector, I want to talk about the exile, we'll get so much from just talking to the protector. So sometimes I think I forget that.
Yeah.
So that was awesome that you said that, because that's a good reminder. And then the other thing is, let's talk about the body as an exile.
Yeah, I mean, I think for many people who have had specifically trauma histories, asking them to come into the body is really scary and unsafe. And so the experience of being embodied is really shut into the basement with the exiled children, as Dick Schwartz talks about.
Yes.
So the body is down
in the basement children. Yeah.
Right, with all the exiles, the body is down there too.
Yeah.
Because our body is, the sensations of our body are going to, even if we don't have a cognitive awareness of it, can be very triggering around the trauma experiences that we've had. And so rather than go in that direction, people will keep themselves safe by just really creating the body as an exile.
Yeah, and that idea that the motive of that, then, like the motive of the protector that's keeping me in my head and not letting me connect to my body, the motive of that is safety.
Yes, exactly. Yep. For, you use the word flooded even when we started to talk about this, right? Right? Because there's a fear that if I go into the body and I be with what the body is carrying as far as its story, its history, that it's going to be really flooding if I don't have, safety in place.
I just thought that idea of like flooding and safety, that it's like in a flood, there's not much safety. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I just had the idea of like, because sometimes we use the word firefighter and we're not really thinking about what that means, but it's like, if there's a fire, you would want a firefighter, like, to help you put out the fire. And so that idea of like flooded is like, that is probably, and fire and flooded, these are very unsafe experiences.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's think of all the nature metaphors we can throw into
this. Tornado is a good one, right? Tornado, like, is completely overwhelming, and emotions are often we talk about the like in DBT, I was trained in DBT.
Yeah.
And so we talk about that tornado, like emotional mind is tornado. Yeah.
Yeah. Tornado 2 could be kind of the mental obsessions that you're focusing on so you don't have to focus on your actual emotional pain.
That is so interesting. I feel like a little bit of like a duh, but like, right, that idea that I could be obsessed with my body and the protector that makes me obsessed with my body is actually really protecting me from feeling from the like the real issue or like feeling the pain and like
Yeah,
the part that would be obsessed in my thoughts is actually keeping me from something else.
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
actually a distraction. It's not like just like a fun Netflix distraction. It's like a
Yeah, it's like if I stay in this mental obsession and this mental preoccupation, which is kind of, I think I heard recently the self-compassion work kind of talking about that as a like a mental freeze when you're in kind of this preoccupation, right?
yeah.
If I stay in that that I don't have to actually be with the work that involves kind of sitting with the pain of what I'm trying to avoid, which is often my shame or my trauma history.
Wow.
I have one for an earthquake.
Yeah, do it.
Okay. So I think an earthquake could be like if my foundation is built on false beliefs of self, and then there's an earthquake that kind of like shifts it up because it's actually not the truth of, and I think that can be really healing because our shame really is around false beliefs that disconnect us from our beauty. So an earthquake could be something that helps us kind of reconnect to a foundation of our authentic original beauty, our self with a capital S, and building our life and our way of seeing ourselves from that place.
That's good. I'm gonna have to think about that. I can't believe you just came up with that. You're just like, yeah, I just came up with this. That's really good. Um, it makes a lot of sense too. You know, it also brings up to my mind that idea of what's the word in family systems about like you'll stay with what you know because it's what you know. There's
Yeah,
that. There's
homeostasis
yeah.
is,
There's that. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a family systems word, right? So that homeostasis is what feels safe, and an earthquake would break up that homeostasis.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's in some ways what a healing journey is, an invitation to us, right? So if we're living our
Mm.
life from this place of disconnection from the truth of our beauty, we have life experiences. Like for me, it was a divorce. I had this life experience that kind of shook up my entire world, and I had to really come into that self-approval. Like, okay, if this is a rejection of who I am, can I be in love with who I am and move forward, right? So I think that I think whatever, that's what it was for me. For people, lots of people, it could be like for someone with eating disorder, it could be going into eating disorder recovery.
Mm.
Really you have to look internally and have that big shake up.
Which I think, when thinking about doing like level one, that's, I think, probably one of the things that's really scary about it is, or any IFS training, is you're doing work on yourself. So it's
Exactly.
not like DBT where I could be like, I know this and I'm learning all these skills, and which is helpful. It helpful in its own way, but it's a completely different experience for me personally, and I think for my clients.
Oh,
Yeah,
definitely. Like it's embodied. We have to be embodied in the process. We
yeah,
have to be embodied in ourself to really sit with a client and ask them to come into their self.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you've mentioned thinking of exiles and shame. What have you found that there are common exiles or common beliefs around with people with eating disorders? Like, do you feel like there's some commonality in their exiles?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
So I'm not good enough. I'm too much. So both of those together. I'm not
Yeah.
enough and I'm too much. Um, unworthiness, um, fear of unlovability. Those are the kind of the main ones that I see. I think one of the common themes that happen with someone with eating disorder is there there is they're in a system where who they are is not necessarily what their caregivers want them to be. Like, this is not for everybody, but something about their authentic original beauty is not what's valued in their system. And
Mm,
so, and that can also not even be in the family, that can be in our society, right? Because we are in this society that values, emotional stoicism, leadership, power, like all of these kind of
masculine traits.
masculine archetype
Yeah.
trait. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you can use archetype after that. And then, and this is the work of Anita Johnston, who's another person in the eating disorder field that I love so much. So many people with eating disorders, the beauty of them is sensitivity and emotional intelligence and intuition and creativity and all of these more feminine archetypes. And so I think for a lot of people, the exile is I'm not valuing these parts of myself because either my family or society is not valuing these parts of myself. And so I go into shame. And that's where the beauty power is that, wow, these traits, compassion, emotions, intuition, sensitivity, these are actually what our society and our world need to heal. So as people can sort of reclaim these qualities instead of being in shame about them, but being like, wow, these are my superpowers, that there's a big service that can be done to our entire planet when
Mm,
we are helping people free up those strengths.
mm. I mean, if people, and myself included, if I could think of my like sensitivity as being my superpower
Yeah.
instead of something that I am ashamed of. So it's Veterans Day. So this won't be published for
Yeah.
a while. So we'll be far beyond Veterans Day when this is published. But it's Veterans Day. And my son was singing they had like a chapel at his school and they were singing the national anthem. So I went and I was only there for like 10 minutes, but they showed this video for Veterans Day and it was heart wrenching. And so, of course, I'm crying. I'm not like hysterically crying, but there's tears.
Yeah, it touched you.
Of course. I mean, it was
Yeah.
really, it's like the one of those videos where like the people from the military, like the moms and dads, like come into the classroom and then the kid jumps up and everyone's crying. It's just like,
Yeah,
oh
there's
my
no,
gosh. They're
yeah.
so touching. And I actually had this I was like trying to like wipe up my like I was try and I felt this part of me that was like embarrassed that I was crying and I had this moment of thinking if I turn around because I was kind of standing up because I had to leave but I turn around and if someone like makes fun of me for crying because that's happened to me throughout my life of being made fun of for crying then I'm going to say this part of me is funny this part of me was like then I'm going to say why are you not crying? And I was like, yes. I mean, that didn't happen. But I was like, that's great because I've been so shamed for that. And I was
Yes.
like, yeah, I'm going to say that. Like, why are you not crying?
Yes, exactly. Advocate for the fact that it makes sense to be emotionally touched by this situation.
Yeah. And I've never, I mean, I was part of me was like, and I'm old and I've never, yeah, it's been a long time and that's never happened. So I love that. And I think that I hear that in my office all the time. When
Yes.
people that come to therapy are often accused, I'm putting that in you
Hmm.
know, air quotes, of being too sensitive.
Yeah.
And and the shame around that is horrible.
Yeah. So I believe that it a person who struggles with eating disorders or body image issues, if they have an underlying like sensitive aspect of their original beauty, and that has been shamed, it's easier to obsess about your body than actually go in and say, hey, maybe I'm okay. Who I am is actually something that's beautiful and a gift to offer.
Like, wait, wait a minute. Can you say that again? That's wow. Okay,
Yeah.
say that again.
It's kind of working backwards from rather than kind of protector to exile. It's like, okay, so if the exile is
Yeah.
I'm too much because I'm sensitive and I have been shamed for that, and my and my belief is actually the sensitivity is a beautiful thing that our world needs, right? So if that's the exile, um instead of like going and being with that exile and starting to learn how can I be with my sensitivity and superpower, it's easier to stay in the protector, which is preoccupation with something's wrong with me, and we're putting that something wrong with me as our body rather than something wrong with me challenging the fact that, wait a second, sensitivity is a beautiful thing.
I like it.
Yeah.
And I think as you're saying that, I'm like, right, because in my family, love them, love your family. And I'm hoping this is resonating with other people. But in my family, if everyone is agreeing Tammy's too sensitive and we all make fun of her, whatever, it would have probably been much harder for me to be like, no, I'm fine. Why aren't you crying at the movie? Right? So it was almost like easier, safer in my family or in my culture or in my class or in lots of different areas of my life. It's easier to be like, yeah, it's me. I'm broken. It's me.
Yeah.
And that's actually feels almost easier.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really relate to this in my own personal journey because I didn't have any sort of big trauma experience. Um, I have an exiled little girl actually that is when I was in the first grade. I was sort of a crybaby in the language of my teachers. I got a U, unsatisfactory, and self-control because I couldn't regulate my emotions. And I have a memory of my teacher not knowing what to do with my sensitivity and so exiling me literally to the bathroom. And I have this memory of being in the bathroom for a very long time. I don't know how long I was in there, but it's so in my system around it's not okay to have emotions. And if you have emotions, you're going to be, exiled. So this is actually a big part of my own personal journey around taking all of that out on my body and starting to be like, hey, wait a second, I am actually okay, and this is a beautiful part of me. In fact, this is part of me that's inspiring this ability to touch and support and connect and help other people heal. Yeah. So I dedicate this talk to my little exiled first grader in the bathroom.
I love her. I want to go in the bathroom with her. Yeah, I want to hang out with her.
You needed someone to come in and co-regulate and just be like,
Yeah.
let's figure out how to get you back into a regulated place. I mean, that's all it takes.
Yeah. Yeah, I love her. It's funny when you were telling me that, I instantly got angry and wanted like to advocate and be like, I need to talk to that teacher and da 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 da. So it's like this angry part of me that wanted to protect her, wanted to stand up for her.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Hmm. I do agree with that too, that it's like and I really do think this, that if there wasn't these sensitive parts of me, then I don't think I'd be that good at my job.
Yeah, it's a really important part for someone who's a therapist and a mother.
Heavens to Betsy. Yeah. This is really true. Um, oh, I know I wanted to talk to you about is soul collage. Can we talk about that?
Yeah. So soul collage is a process that was created by a woman named Sina Frost or Forst. I'm sorry. I have a little dyslexia. So one of those last names is right.
Sina, which is an awesome name.
Yeah. And the idea of this process is basically she's inviting people to create images of their parts. Like it actually overlaps with IFS in a really interesting way. And she has different language for it. But she has a collage that's not using words, but just with images and creating cards. They're usually like 6x8, and you create a card with just images to represent a part, and then she has this whole dialogue process that she supports people with journaling around it.
Wow.
So when I'm creating, I was trained in the soul collage process, and when I was creating Reclaiming Beauty, I kept thinking like, I don't want people to think that I'm being an expert on them. I really want this all to be an invitation to their own self-exploration. So I have this card deck, and it's super fun. It's 50 cards. My artist for the card deck was my friend Leah Joy, who I love, and she did such a beautiful job with it. But I was thinking like, maybe everybody isn't going to love all the pink and purple and girly stuff in this deck, right? And maybe they'll want to create their own deck And so I thought the soul collage process would be a cool way to invite someone to reflect on the ideas and then kind of make their own deck through, like, so if a word is in body, let's create a card through the soul collage process that represents that for you. Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I do have a funny story. I had a client that was like, Heidi, I cannot take this Reclaiming Beauty deck. It's like too pink and purple and girly. And I was like, I get it. I totally get it. And we kind of broke it down and realized that it was her own rejection of the feminine archetype in herself that was creating this rejection of the deck. And so it became a real interesting parallel to this idea that we just talked about.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, that idea that like that's a protector, like that's a protector, and that
Yeah.
how much healing happened with just focusing on that.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
you had to be in some self energy not to be defensive.
Well, it's easy because I think like art is very subjective around what you like and what you don't like, right? So this deck and the images, some people are like, wow, this is amazing. Other people are like, oh, it's so not my thing. And that's good. That's not the point of it. It's actually the point of it is an invitation to this exploration. So the
Yeah, I
soul
love that.
collage is like, make your own images, right?
Yeah,
This is a process. This Reclaiming Beauty process is a process we can all relate to. Make your own images to represent the different themes.
I love it. Well, and I think it taps into something else, right? We use words so much, and I use words a lot, obviously, but that idea that like using an image taps into something else, different
Yes.
parts of our brain and all that stuff. So I love that.
And if part of this too is about what's healing is authentic mirroring of ourself, then creating images that reflect that is a way for us to do that for our own self, right? These are images that
Mm.
feel like an authentic mirror of what I see in this concept.
Hmm. So Heidi, this has been really fun. Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
always I always end with if you were not a therapist and an author and all the things that you do, what would you do instead?
I love this question because it's connected actually in a way to the history of Reclaiming Beauty. So, the artist for Reclaiming Beauty, her name is Leah Joy. And Leah and I were, we've been creative collaborators in our life, and we were in a band together in California in 1999, 2000. And so we have been creative collaborators in another project. And I kind of came back to her and I was like, I really think that you're supposed to be the one that does the art for this. So that was cool. So the answer is I would be in a rock band. I would be a 44-year-old woman, like killing it in a rock band.
I love this so much. Okay, are we talking like Go-Go's? Like, do you remember the Go-Go's? Like, I loved them. Like, are we talking like Pat Benatar? Like, what's the feel of your rock band?
Yeah. Well, so I think at this age, honestly, I so I'm 44 years old, kind of going through that transition as a woman in the 40s, and there's something about this that's really helping me tap in with my anger, that part of me that has anger around these big issues that are happening in the world and in life, and why is there so much pain that creates this disconnection from my beauty and the pain that I see in my clients, the things that they've been through. um, so it would be kind of like an angry woman, Joan Jett kind of feel, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Oh, and man, wouldn't that feel so good to be on stage and screaming and rocking out and jumping around like, yes.
Yes, a
Yes.
very embodied, like unapologetic. This is who I am, and it would be like hilarious rock songs about being a sensitive person in the world. That would feel really confusing, the
Yes.
juxtaposition of it, but they would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I'm with that. If you ever do that, I would like to be a part of that. Like I could be your tour manager, like get your hotel rooms or something like that.
I don't know. I have a feeling that actually there's a part of you that might be actually in the band.
I would be in the band, but I have no musical ability. So, but I could be on stage and make a fool out of myself and have no problem doing that, but I have no musical ability. But I would love to be in a band.
Yeah, well,
If you could not have any musical ability, then
yeah.
I could do that.
I think part of it is like a band is someone up there in the full expression of themselves, giving permission to all the people that are listening to be the full expression of yourself. And so in some ways, Tammy, in the work that you're doing right now, you kind of are like an IFS podcast band.
Heidi, this was great. It was so nice to talk to you and meet you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Especially, I've just sort of realized it's the four-year-old birthday of Reclaiming Beauty. So thank you for inviting it to have a outlet on its birthday.
I love it.
Yeah.
So if people want to get to find you and your amazing book and cards, how would they do that?
I have a website, reclaimingbeauty.com, and that's actually the only place where you can get the book and the card deck together. There are other ways to get the book at this point, but if you want to get the book and the card deck together, that's the place to do it.
And that's what you want. Listeners, that's what you want to do, because don't you want to see these cards, all the pink and purple amazingness of the cards? So go check out Heidi, reclaimingbeauty.com. Her website's beautiful, and get the book and the cards.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Heidi. This was great. Thanks for hanging out today. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFSTammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time.